The early 20th century was marked by a desire for change and a willingness to challenge long-established social paradigms. Perhaps no country was more ready for this change than China. China had been under imperial rule for over 4,000 years. The height of the empire had passed long before, and now China lagged behind in economic and social development. The masses were generally uneducated, and the condition of women was extremely poor. Many Chinese students who were going to study abroad encountered new ideas, and some learned of an emerging world religion, the Baha'i Faith. The Baha'i Faith believes the crucial need facing humanity is to find a unifying vision for the future of society. Such a vision unfolds in the writings of Baha'u'llah. The first Chinese person to accept the faith was Chen Haiyan, who became a Baha'i in 1919 while studying law at Columbia University. Three outstanding early Chinese believers were Cao Yunxiang, Hilda Yan, and Liao Chongzhen. Books have been written about Cao Yunxiang, president of Tsinghua University, who did much translation work, and about Hilda Yan, the niece of Yan Huiqing, premier of China in the 1920s and the first Chinese ambassador to the Soviet Union. Hilda helped establish the Baha'i International Community as an NGO at the United Nations. The third person, Liao Chongzhen, was an admired governmental official who had the privilege of being a correspondent with Shoghi Effendi, the head of the Baha'i Faith at that time. Liao Chongzhen dedicated his energies to the translation of the Baha'i writings into Chinese. Although he led a remarkable life, few details have survived, and until recently, only one verified picture was available. There's a picture of an Asian family that Shoghi Effendi lovingly hung in one of the rooms of the Bahá'í mansion in Israel. Could it be that this is of Liao Chongzhen and his family? And all information about the fate of Liao Chongzhen has been a mystery. In October 2014, there was a breakthrough. This picture was posted online. The caption said, "Wedding of Liao Chongzhen and Sun Lishu, Canton, 1931." Could it be the same Liao Chongzhen? Many things matched. The groom in the picture resembled the picture we had of Liao Chongzhen. Furthermore, the bride and groom resembled the couple in the picture at Bahá'í. The person who posted the picture online was contacted, and he replied, "Liao Chongzhen was my great-uncle. I'm his eldest sister's grandson. If you like, I can get you in touch with his daughter." Thanks to these new findings, we've been able to piece together much more about Liao Chongzhen's life, and we're glad to present them in this film. Liao Chongzhen was born in Canton, present-day Guangzhou. He was the fourth in a family of 10 children and the eldest son. Liao Chongzhen's family history is fascinating. The exploits of his father and grandfather were exemplary, and we can see through this lens how Liao's character developed. His grandfather, Liao Chongzhen, was an orphan who roamed the streets of Canton, where some Christian missionaries had set up feeding stations for the hordes of suffering humanity displaced by war and the misrule of the Manchus. At 14, he converted to Christianity. Later in life, as a self-educated man, he became a doctor of Chinese medicine, a Baptist minister fluent in English, and an admirer of democracy. He had one son, Liao Deshan, who also became a Baptist minister. Liao Deshan went to study medicine at Canton Boji Hospital, where he met Sun Yat Sen. Sun Yat Sen played an instrumental role in the overthrow of the Qing dynasty and was appointed to serve as provisional president of the Republic of China when it was founded in 1912. When Liao Deshan and Sun Yat Sen returned to Canton, Dr. Liao's home became a meeting place for Dr. Sun and other revolutionaries. Liao Deshan believed in universal suffrage, advocated the equality of the sexes, education of women, the unbinding of women's feet, and abolishing polygamy. He thought that women should have the opportunity to be educated, as only an educated mother could raise an educated child. These were the principles that made the foundation of his children's upbringing and no doubt shaped his eldest son's character. Liao Deshan, unusual in his time or any time, practiced what he preached. As a young doctor during the 1880s and the 1890s, he went from village to village, offering medical care. When the peasants couldn't pay him, they often asked what they could do for him. His response was to ask if they would allow him to unbind their daughter's feet. Quite often, the peasants allowed this, even though it was dangerous to go against age-old customs, because he had saved lives and spared them pain. When his eldest daughter asked why he was so adamant about unbinding women's feet, he replied, "Because women pass their pains on to their children." Liao Deshan founded Puiqing Middle School. Puiqing Middle School is now a thriving institution with branches in Macau and Hong Kong, and a Nobel Prize winner in physics was a student there. After a failed uprising, Liao Deshan, along with Sun Yat Sen and others, went into exile in Japan. He later returned to Canton, where he taught health and was the doctor at Lingnan University, and in exchange, he asked that his children could study free. Liao Deshan originated the slogan, "Change China through education." He had one wife and 10 children, of which 7 were girls, and none of them had bound feet. Liao Chongzhen was the product of his upbringing. He was born on the 25th of May, 1898. He was a sportsman and participated in the 1915 and 1917 Far Eastern Championship Games, the precursor of the Asian Games, in Shanghai and in Tokyo, in volleyball and track and field. At age 19, he attended Lingnan University. In 1919, he sailed from Hong Kong to San Francisco aboard the Nanking steamship to study at Cornell University. There, he came in contact with the Baha'i Faith. He was introduced to the faith by Roy Wilhelm and Mr. Fazl's talks. In 1921, Liao Chongzhen became a Baha'i. The Baha'i Faith, with its ideals of unity and diversity, equality of the sexes, and harmony of science and religion, must have resonated deeply within Liao Chongzhen's heart.
My name is Diamond Liu, and I am the daughter of Liao Chongzhen. He had 5 children. I'm the youngest daughter. He's an athlete. When he was at Cornell, he ran the marathon. He won several medals in the precursor of the Asian Games. He has a great sense of humor. He loved to tell jokes. He was very gregarious. He loved to invite friends to dinner. His house in Canton was full of visitors. My grandfather, one of the founders of Kuomintang, he believed in the equality of the gender. He believed in universality. He believed in democracy. And my father did tell me that what grandfather believed in existed in Baha'ism. He felt very comfortable embracing Baha'ism because all the things he inherited from grandfather, he found in Baha'ism.
1924年，廖崇祯学成归国，他下定决心要致力于中国农业的发展，致力于增进中国农民的福祉。最初几年，他应该在广州工作，后来到了东北一家林场工作。大约在20年代末，他回到广州，被任命为广东省农林局的副局长。后来呢，被聘为中山大学农学院的教授，还一度担任过系主任。1933年，廖崇祯被任命为广东省蚕丝改良局的局长。他在这个岗位上一干就是6年。他扎根基层，开拓创新，对广东省蚕丝改良业的恢复和发展做出了重要贡献。用今天的话来说，廖崇祯也是一位学者型官员。他结合自己的专业和工作，积极进行相关研究，发表了30-40篇论文，还撰写了2部关于中国农业发展的著作。廖崇祯在工作中平易近人，作风民主，深受同事、下属和农民们的敬重。他始终把农民的利益放在心头，给农民们免费开办夜校，分发印刷物，以帮助提高他们的文化水平和农业知识。他还联系银行，由蚕丝局和他本人担保，给农民们提供小额信贷。这在当时可以说是一个创举。我读过这么一个故事，就是一次有几位农民朋友拿着地契来贷款，廖崇祯说有我担保就不用地契抵押。农民们不相信，从来没听说过不要地契的贷款，非要坚持把地契留下，他们才放心。廖崇祯只好把地契收下保存起来。一段时间后，又派人送还到农民手里，这让农民们感念不已。
Deeply aware of the benefits that the Baha'i teachings could bring to his homeland, in 1924, he arranged a meeting between the renowned Baha'i journalist Martha Root and Dr. Sun Yat Sen, in which he served as an interpreter. Liao Chongzhen later reported that Dr. Sun Yat Sen heard and read about the Baha'i Faith and also declared that it was highly relevant to the needs of China. Martha Root visited Canton again in 1930 and stayed there for a week. Liao Chongzhen and his eldest sisters arranged for her broadcasts over the Canton radio and lectures at Sun Yat Sen University and its secondary schools. 3 of her radio broadcasts were published in a special 2-page spread supplement of the Canton Municipal Daily News on the 23rd of September, 1930. They also arranged for her to encounter Chen Mingqiu, governor of Guangdong. Mr. Chen said,
I didn't know much about this Baha'i movement until you sent me a booklet 2 days ago. But as I read it, I believe Baha'u'llah was a prophet, and China has need of a prophet in these days. Such teachings, at their lowest estimate, could not harm any nation, and at their highest they could do great good in China and in every country. No nation is more fitted to receive these teachings than China.
My father explained to me why he became a Baha'i. He said to me, And I can only paraphrase after so many years. And this is really one of the few times I recounted the story because, who am I going to tell this to? He said he embraced Baha'ism because he experienced a lot of racism in the United States. When he was at Yale University, he was, in fact, the racism at Yale was so bad, he left and transferred to Cornell University. And race equality was something he regarded as very, very important. He even told me at that time that I can marry anybody, a Jew, a black man, a white man, a Chinese, a Japanese, as long as he has good character, as long as he's educated, it would be fine with him. And he also said he found religions that has a definable image of God, both arrogant and unconceivable. Because he said there is a need to believe in God, this great mysterious being, because there's no other way to explain the world, the universe, how it comes into being. But as humans, we would not have the ability to describe this God. It's beyond us. To assume so is hubris and arrogant. And he liked Baha'i because it did not venture into the unfathomable, into the mysterious, did not impose an image on you, an arrogance onto this understanding of God. And he also said that he believed in universality, which was very important to him. He embraced the world, he embraced humanity, all humanity, regardless of colors. And Baha'ism allowed him to do that.
All of Liao Chongzhen's sisters were outstanding people who dedicated their lives to the ideal of changed China through education. The eldest sister, Liao Fang Ling, studied at Wellesley and got her master's degree in education at Columbia University. When she returned to China, she married Zhang Fu Wang, a famous mining engineer who was the younger brother of the diplomat Zhang Ting Wang, the Chinese foreign minister, and later the first Chinese ambassador to the United States. She was instrumental in opening up Chinese universities to women. After she came back to China, she served as first dean of the Women's College at Lingnan University. In her final speech at Wellesley, before returning to China, she said,
"The task that the modern woman has before her is not the copying of the West here and the East there, but rather of creating a new thing through a deeper appreciation of what is best in both. The woman of China, in her eagerness to follow her Western sisters, must not forget the legacy that has been handed down to her. Her duty is to make music and harmony out of the world of strife. It is the task of the modern woman to extend this influence throughout society and to fill the whole world with the melody of calm and peace."
她是大姐姐，她就特别爱她底下的弟弟妹妹，所以她当时因为她的经济条件是最好的，所以她就负起了所有的就是责任。弟弟妹妹读大学呀，留学呀。他们都反正一出来一个就帮，出来一个就帮，因为当时那个外曾祖母有个家训，就是说因为生了10个小孩嘛，出来第一个出来工作的就要帮第2个，然后第2个和第1个又要联合起来再帮第3个，所以他们就10个兄弟姐妹，全都是大学毕业，然后呢有。大部分吧都去美国留学了，这当时在中国来讲，这个真是很觉得有点不可思议。我们后来了解到，都觉得有点像奇迹一样的，因为当时在中国那个年代，很少有。
The second sister, Liao Fang Ling, studied at Smith College, the first Chinese woman to do so. She also got her master's in education at Columbia University. When she returned to Canton, she served as Madame Sun Yat Sen's English secretary and later on as principal of Canton Jiexin Middle School. She also served on the board of directors of Lingnan University. On April 11, 1924, she wrote to Martha Root,
I want to assure you that during your brief visit in Canton, you have sowed seeds for the Baha'i course, which in due time will bring forth a thousandfold. You have certainly given a new impetus to my religious life. I have found in the Baha'i teachings that something which I have hitherto sought for in vain. I find that it satisfies both the requirements of the intellect and the longings of the heart. The Baha'i movement appears to me that it is a movement for the doing away of all kinds of prejudice, which is so detrimental to all kinds of thinking, both spiritually and intellectually, and for the ushering in of the new era of universal brotherhood through the spirit of goodwill.
Liao Chongzhen's other elder sister was Liao Fang Ling, who after studying in the UK moved to the US to pursue her master's in education at Bryn Mawr. She was the first Chinese to enter Bryn Mawr. In 1925, she founded Yuehua College, where she served as its president for over 20 years.
我的三姑婆，她终身未嫁，她是一个很杰出的老师，她对学生特别的严格，然后那学生都很怕她，但是呢又很爱她，她对学生也很爱，倾注了特别多的感情，所以她一直忙，她根本没有时间去结婚，一直到50年代，她去世的时候，我们通过报纸、电台知道，当时就是她的学生从全国和世界各地赶来的有3000多人。
Liao Chongzhen's younger sisters were also outstanding. When Liao Fang Ling was a child, her mother presented her to Dr. Sun Yat Sen. He stroked her head and said, "You will grow up to do great things for this country." She studied at Michigan University, where she heard about the Baha'i Faith from Martha Root. In 1931, on her way back to China, she stopped in Yokohama, Japan, where she met Hands of the Cause of God Agnes Alexander and Keith Ransom Keller. Agnes Alexander recalls,
While her steamer was in port in Yokohama, Miss Liu came to Tokyo and spent a night with us. It was an especially happy occasion, as it was the evening when we held a Baha'i meeting, and a spiritual unity was made between this Chinese young woman and the Japanese friends.
Later that year, when Keith Ransom Keller visited Canton, she was invited by Liao Fang Ling to stay in their family's home.
We came to dock at Kowloon on the China side with Liao Fang Ling in the Chinese costume of peach color waving welcome from the dock. We were met by dear Baha'i brother Liao Chongzhen. I had the opportunity to give talks at radios and at several gatherings where Liao Fang Ling and Liao Chongzhen served as interpreters. I had several long discussions with many members of this remarkable family. In one of those discussions, Liao Chongzhen asked me, "Did Shoghi Effendi ever speak of China?" With what thrilling joy I was able to tell him that on several occasions Shoghi Effendi had spoken of the vast importance of work in China and of his pleasure at Martha's visit. God knows what this visit to Canton has meant to me, and to find an eager, brilliant, firm Baha'i like Liao Chongzhen in the heart of China.
She was the first Chinese president of Concordia College for Women, which in 1937 was ranked by the Ministry of Education as one of the top 9 secondary schools in the country. In January 1939, she wrote to Martha Root,
I often think of you, of your inspiring personality, and of the cause you are trying to promote and spread throughout the world. I do pray that love will live on and peace and goodwill may live on earth.
Her life of service and education continued, and she served as Deputy Director of the City Department of Education, member of the Municipal CPPCC Standing Committee, and as President of Guangzhou Children's Welfare Association. An award bearing her name has been created in Guangzhou, the Liao Fang Ling Award for Outstanding Teaching, as well as the establishment of a kindergarten bearing her name.
是个特别好，然后特别慈祥的一个老人。然后小的时候跟他很亲的，他特别照顾我妈妈呀，他们这些侄子侄女。然后那时候我和我表妹小的时候，整天往他家里跑。廖凤玲她的扶贫助学基金和幼儿园的那个基金到现在都一直还在运行。第10个就石姑婆，她和宋美龄在广州办了的孤儿院，她当院长。
Liao Chongzhen, in one of his letters, wrote,
"The Baha'i Faith is very broad and profound. It is the guide for salvation. Its value is infinite. The Baha'i Faith's emphasis is on practicing, not on preaching. I truly believe that the Baha'i Faith is the remedy for the disputes of today's world and the basis of setting up a new world."
He openly shared and supported this new belief. One of his close friends was the philosopher and writer Hu Xi, who in 1939 was nominated for a Nobel Prize in Literature. In 1931, Liao Chongzhen wrote an article, A Chinese View of the Baha'i Cause, that appeared in the Baha'i World, 1932 to 1934, an international Baha'i publication.
In this war-torn world, and in the midst of world economic depression, naturally one begins to think of the deeper problems in life. Can we lessen the amount of sufferings in the world? Instead of spending 70% or more of our revenue for war preparations, will a larger percentage of it go into education and other constructive purposes? In spite of our wonderful scientific discoveries in these few centuries, can better use be made of them for the benefit of humanity instead of killing each other? So much is heard about overproduction in certain sections of the world, and much suffering is being wrought. Yet, in many parts of the world, the people are in dire want. Can a better system of distribution be devised so that the entire human family will be mutually benefited? With our modern communications and method of production, no nation is able to keep her doors closed from other nations, and the world ought to be treated as one economic whole. And yet, we are prevented by our ancient ideas, prejudices, and narrow ideas of nationalism and race. To be certain of creating a better world order, humanity must undergo a psychological change. In other words, a change of hearts is needed. Moreover, there must be certain sound principles to go by. In addition to sound principles, there must be some practical organization so as to crystallize or prosecute these principles and for their fulfillment. In 1921, when I was a student at Cornell University, I first heard of the cause and was much impressed by its beauty and greatness. I feel that the Baha'i cause embodied all the essentials for working out a new epoch, which I outline above, and being consistent with the best ideas of the past and present.
It's remarkable to see how the world-embracing teachings of the Baha'i Faith had transformed Liao Chongzhen's vision of life, especially considering the time when he lived, which was a period of history characterized by bitter national sentiments and pernicious prejudices. Liao Chongzhen married Sun Lishu in Canton in 1931, and their marriage bore 5 children. Their first child was named Da Tong, meaning Great Unity, which is what the Baha'i Faith was called in China in those days.
My aunt, my oldest aunt, the number 1 of the 10 children, who was particularly close to my father. She used to tell me that when you get older, you'll realize how intelligent your father is, and that's absolutely true. Every year I get older, my father got smarter. Like my grandfather, my father practiced what he preached. He had 5 children. He gave all 5 children boys' names. Regardless of girls or boys, they all had boys' names. And he gave us all the freedom to choose the life we choose. He never told me there's anything I couldn't do. He expected me to succeed without dictating that I must become this or that.
说我外公是个很慈祥的一个人啊，说是少有的好爸爸。我外公跟我妈妈的关系是最好的，因为他特别疼爱这个女儿。然后我妈妈就会经常跟我讲说，因为很忙嘛，工作特别忙，她一回来她就自己趴在地下当马，让他们骑在身上玩。那她从来对小孩不发火，她不打他们，也不骂他们，有什么事她会好好的去跟他们说。我外公在与我外婆结婚之前有过一个未婚妻，是马来西亚的一个富商的女儿。可是在他们准备结婚前夕，我外公的未婚妻突然就病逝了。然后后来我外公认识了我外婆以后，就带我外婆去见他前未婚妻的父母。他原来的未婚妻的父母很喜欢我外婆，就认了她做干女儿，然后又把自己亲生女儿的原来准备的嫁妆转赠给了我外婆。
From 1933 onwards, Liao Chongzhen was in charge of Guangdong Bureau for the Improvement of Sericulture. Most of his work was in the county of Shunde. His work in this function was remarkable. He built and named dams, bridges, and irrigation canals in the area, dramatically improving the productivity of silk farming. The studies he wrote are still used as a reference and a manual in this field. Since then, Shunde has become a very rich county, ranking as top 3 in the list of the most affluent counties in China.
My father was a very generous person. He's a very kind person. And if you look at his face, you can tell he was a very kind person. He's very kind to people who are less fortunate. But he's also was a very courageous person. He's not afraid of kicking bullies. In fact, I suspect he enjoyed kicking bullies in his protection of the weaker and less fortunate, which I think is the reason why he chose to become a politician. He wanted to protect people, to give people a better life, and he was a very good, very honest politician. He never had any money. He liked giving friends, younger siblings, his money. He liked helping people. That was his nature.
反正从我妈妈口里说到的都是我外公都是一个特别好的人，特别慈祥，然后很有学问，为人很正直。他当官的时候他很清廉，他1分钱都不贪，你送上门了他就把你赶出去。
In 1933, Liao Chongzhen started a correspondence with Shoghi Effendi, asking how he could best serve. Shoghi Effendi asked him to concentrate his efforts on the translation of the Baha'i writings into Chinese.
大约从1933年开始，廖崇祯在繁忙的工作之余，又开始了一项他认为可以造福同胞的工作，那就是翻译巴哈伊圣作。根据我们目前掌握的资料，在其后6年的时间里，廖崇祯应该翻译了4部巴哈伊的著作，包括大同教引言经、大同教光华经，就是巴哈欧拉书简集，阿卜杜巴哈论神圣哲学，以及巴哈欧拉祈祷与默示录。那么这其中，只有引言经得以于1937年出版。那么引言经装订是比较精美的，然后还有题词。它的译文采用的是文言文，比较典雅，但是对今天的读者来说可能有点难懂。我给大家读一段：生命之子乎，为爱我故，何遵守愚之法律？苟若寻求愚之所欲，何舍弃弱己之所欲？那么这个译本服务华人世界近40年，直到1974年，才有台湾译者参考廖崇祯的译本，翻译出版了白话文版《引言经》。至于其他3部译著，一直未能出版，而且译稿呢，我们一直以为是在战乱中丢失了，直到最近，我们才有了一个发现，就是从美国档案馆里找到了这个大同教光华经，就是巴哈欧拉书简集的译稿。从译者序可知，廖崇祯在这本书上花了5年时间。实际上，在头3年，他已经完成了翻译，只是不满意，所以又在其后的2年里，请几位朋友，校阅修改。等到完成可以出版的时候，已经是1938年，当时抗日战争已经爆发，无法出版。但是从这个过程中，我们也可以看出廖崇祯对宗教经典的翻译是多么的精益求精。
Liao Chongzhen would continue corresponding with Martha Root throughout these years until her passing in 1939. On November 30th, 1936, he wrote to her about his progress in the translations.
I am looking forward to the day that I can devote all my time into the translation of Baha'i literature into Chinese, and our country needs the cause so much.
In another letter to Martha Root, he wrote,
The compliment that you gave me, I am afraid I do not deserve. Baha'u'llah is the hope of the world. What else can we do but turn to him in this war-torn world? As I am quite pressed with time, I try to do a little translation each morning before going to work. My humble contribution can never be compared with what you have done for the cause.
In January 1936, The Guardian invited Baha'i youth of the world to a joint celebration of the Baha'i New Year. In demonstration of the international unity among Baha'i youth, 26 regional conferences were organized by youth around the globe. Conferences occurred in 16 cities in North America and in London, Paris, Hamburg, Heidelberg, Alexandria, Baghdad, Karachi, Pune, Tokyo, and Canton. The conference in Canton was organized by Liao Chongzhen, and he announced it through the newspapers. His guests formed the nucleus of a new study group. In early 1938, the atmosphere in Canton was intense due to the pending Japanese invasion. On the 17th of June, he wrote this moving letter to The Guardian.
In the midst of bombs and bullets, I have completed the translation of the books. For I believe the eventual salvation of the world lies in the realizations of these principles of Baha'u'llah, and I want to perform my small part in bringing these glad tidings to our people.
Liao Chongzhen later that year moved to Hong Kong, becoming the first Chinese Baha'i to live in Hong Kong. By 1940, he was back on the mainland and joined his wife in Guilin, her native city, to work for the provincial government. Then in 1944, he returned to Canton.
My father and my mother were separated during much of the war. My father did manage to take the family to Hong Kong in 1949, and they were refugees. They stayed with my father's younger sister, number 8. My mother just took the children, left to Canton, where my father's mother had a house. And my mother's reasoning was that even, at least in Canton, we have a house, we have a roof over our head. And in Hong Kong, we had nothing. And my father followed her and the family back to Canton. And he was in Canton for a while. And because of my father, because of who he was, and the fact that he was a very well-known politician who was known to have done good work for the people, particularly on irrigations and building dams and reviving farmlands in southern China. And he almost single-handedly revived the silk industry in southern China. He had many admirers, and many of them in the Chinese Communist Party. And several of them came and wanted him to flee. And he basically left overnight with just his shirt on his back. And he ran back to Hong Kong. And he stayed in Hong Kong for a couple of years before he immigrated to the United States. Although he could have gone to Taiwan because he was the national representative, he was elected to the national legislature. He would have a house, he would have a driver, he would have a sinecure for the rest of his life. But he chose to come to the United States partly because he had long ties with the United States, and partly because his sister, his older sister, the number 1 daughter, whom he was very close to, migrated here. For the rest of his life, he lived in New York City on Broadway, Upper West Side, New York.
我叫刘江秀，我小的时候就跟妈妈姓廖，然后后来大了，然后再转跟父亲姓。我的名字的来历其实是很曲折的，因为当时我出生的时候是60年代嘛，国家特别困难。我外公因为已经到国外有10多年了，他又没办法回来，他又很想念这边的山山水水，所以我外公就考虑了很久，他翻词典，然后考虑了很久，他就给我起个名字叫江秀。江秀的意思呢，就是说他特别怀念祖国这边的山山水水，江山秀丽。我的名字其实很美的。
Liao Chongzhen obtained U.S. citizenship on November 26, 1962.
The first time I met him I was 14. He left before I was born. I went to Hong Kong on my own. I was 11 at the time. I stayed there for 2.5 years. President Lyndon Johnson had reformed immigration law. So I came. And my father, with Senator Jacob Jeffers' help, who apparently was a friend of my father's, I came very quickly to the United States with the help of apparently his letter to the immigration office, and I came to the United States. I wasn't able to get my mother out until 1980. So that's 10 years after my father died. I went to Chicago and I stayed with my father's younger brother at the number 9th. And my father came to visit me from New York in 1966. And he took me to the Baha'i temple in Chicago. It was an unforgettable experience for me. Probably it was really the first time my father and I had a real conversation. And the temple, of course, is inspiring. It's really beautiful and using concrete. The architect did a wonderful job. And later on, I realized it influenced my choice to become an architect myself. And it's on that visit to the temple, my father explained to me why he became a Baha'i. When I was 15 years old, I went to live with him in New York. And his circumstance was very different from when he was in Canton, when he was a popular politician. He also had to learn to cook when he was in New York, and he would every Sunday night sit me down and cook a meal for us and talk to me about history of China and politics. And at the time, I didn't value it, but over the years, I have learned how deep some of those lessons were and how valuable they were. At the time, I just complained about the food because his idea of cooking was dump everything in the same pot. And being Cantonese, we are very particular about our food. This is a picture when my father was at the height of his career in Canton as a politician. And this is a picture of my father's passport photo about maybe 2 years before his death. His life was difficult. He came here as a former politician in his late 50s. It was very difficult to find a job, despite his Ivy League degrees. He worked it for a number of years as a lab technician, and then he lost that job when he hit 65. He was retired out of his job. He could not find another job at age 65. He became a waiter in a Chinese restaurant for a number of years. But he never told the restaurant owner that he had Ivy League degrees.
While in the United States, Liao Chongzhen continued with his translation work, as is shown in his correspondence with the Asian Teaching Committee. In 1959, in one of his letters to the committee, he writes,
"Last Sunday, a couple of Baha'i friends came to my apartment and have a Chinese lunch. I have not been able to participate in the local Baha'i activities as much as I like to. With Baha'i greetings, Liao Chongzhen."
I didn't see any of it. I mean, he didn't show it to me. It's only recently I found out that he was still translating in the 1960s. That means, when I was living with him, he was still translating. But he did talk to me about it. The passion clearly showed itself when he took me to the Baha'i temple in Chicago. And that was the first inkling of his passion. I think he wanted me to become a Baha'i. But he never asked me, and he never forced me.
It must be dear to the heart of Liao Chongzhen to know that his dedication to the translation of the writings has brought great fruits, and so much literature is now available to his countrymen in their own mother tongue.
Later, he took an examination and qualified as a social worker for the state of New York. And he really liked that job because he get to help people again, which was his passion. And he was good at it. And that was the time when I lived with him, when he worked as a social worker. And most of the people he helped were Black and Puerto Ricans. He taught me history, he taught me politics, he taught me right from wrong. Many of the lessons I did not get until 20, 30 years later. So in many ways, it was a blessing for me to become who I am and what I am, and to do what I can do today was blessings from him. This is a picture of my father the last year of his life, a picture I took. And I believe this is the last picture of him ever taken.
Liao Chongzhen passed away in Manhattan in 1971. The life of a man who sacrificed all his energy for the well-being of humanity and for bringing the message of Baha'u'llah to the people comes to an end. Within each one of us lies the choice to choose our path, to either be a spectator of this unfolding drama that will bring humanity to world unity, or emulate Liao Chongzhen and embark on a journey of personal transformation that will lead us to embody with our actions and our dedication the principles laid down by Baha'u'llah. Only posterity will be able to rightfully give homage to such an outstanding servant. We will end by sharing this letter that Liao Chongzhen wrote in the midst of very dire times to Roy Wilhelm while he was a refugee in Hong Kong in 1940.
Dear Roy, I hope you will forgive your brother of not being able to print the book Some Answered Questions for you so far. The reason of my delay will be explained later in the letter. I have a scheme whereby, with your assistance, I hope will work out for the solution of printing the book as well as saving my family from starvation. In a separate mail, I shall send you 400 Chinese old stamps for the celebration of the 150th anniversaries of the establishment of the American Republic. I hope you will assist me to sell them in whatever price you can. After disposing them, please take 10% of the proceeds to buy something or whatever you think best for Miss Martha Root's tomb in Honolulu as a humble tribute from a Chinese brother in memory of her pioneer work in China. Then please take another 10% as a small contribution of the Baha'i Temple in Chicago. The rest, please send back to me in Hong Kong. I shall at once proceed to print the books as well as to keep my family alive for a while. Last year, having rendered the divine philosophy of Abdu'l-Baha into our language, and before leaving Hong Kong for the interior, I requested our guardian, Mr Shoghi Effendi, as to what should I translate next. His reply was, "The Prayers and Meditations of Baha'u'llah." In spite of the frequent air raids, traveling, and the uncertainty of unemployment, etc., I was able to bring the whole translation into completion on the 29th of September, 1939. I have seen enough suffering of the soldiers as well as the common people. I have come to the conclusion that Baha'u'llah's solution is the only remedy for the world. I shall devote the rest of my life to translate the words of God into our language and to spread the cause in China. It is my dream to open a shop in Hong Kong to sell Baha'i books and flowers, at the same time to spread both the spiritual as well as the material fragrance throughout the length and breadth of China. With Baha'i greetings, yours very sincerely, Liao Chongzhen.